try this. There we go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Too Opinionated, where I'm just delighted today to have the incredible voice talent of Neil Ross on the program. Welcome, Neil.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. And you know, we really appreciate you. We've had a little bit of trouble having you on. We tried to have you about a month ago, and Brett, who is my partner in crime, came down with the flu, and we couldn't have you. He's sick again, so he's missing out today. But then we rescheduled you a month ago to be on for Friday, and I didn't put it in the calendar, and I missed it. And most people would have just walked away from us at that point. And you were so kind and hung in there with us, and we're delighted.
Well, I have never made a mistake in my entire life. So there's no earthly way I could forgive you.
Well, you know, I told you this before we came on, but you know, Brett, he's 20. He's in school for film editing. He's our technical person, and he was sick, so it was me doing the, you know, even the calendar work and stuff. So I'm going to blame him.
Well, I sympathize with you. I have to deal with technical too, and it's not my strong suit.
I'm getting better, but it's been a slow process. Well, Neil, let's start with. Yeah, I'm curious to how you got into the voiceover bit, and you know, if you could just give us a little bit of your background and what got you started in the business.
Sure. Well, the sort of the Reader's Digest version is that we had no television in the home when I was growing up, so it was all pretty much the radio and the record player, and mostly the radio. And I was very fortunate I was born in London, England, but we emigrated to Canada when I was 2 years old. So this is all happening in Canada. When I was about 5 or 6, I had access to the CBC, which is the Canadian equivalent of the BBC, a government-operated radio service. And then they had independent stations in Canada. And I was able to hear a ton of great radio, drama, comedy, et cetera, via the BBC, the CBC, and then, of course, from the United States, we heard a ton of radio shows. Yeah. And I got in, and I was able to hear sort of the tail end of the golden age of radio. Radio, for your younger audience, was just like television is now. That's where all the cop shows and the game shows and the variety shows, they were all on radio. And then television came along and stole all that, and radio ended up being more or less what it is today, guys playing records.
That's exactly right.
But I'm at any rate, I heard a ton of stuff, and I found myself at a very young age fascinated by the human voice.
Right.
Variety of voices that one heard, the variety of accents that one heard. And I would tune around avoiding music and just listening to voices, even if I couldn't understand what they were talking about. I just enjoyed hearing the various voices. And over time, I started trying to reproduce a little of what I heard. And I can remember my dad brought a tape recorder home from work one day. And in those days, tape recorders, very expensive. This thing was the size of a suitcase, and it belonged to the business where he worked. And he let me record something. And what I did was I took the funny papers out of the Montreal Star. And I did every one of the funny papers. I read the dialogue. I played all the characters.
I love that.
And listened to it back and was quite pleased, not from an ego trip, but just, oh, okay, that's what I meant to do, and I've obviously succeeded. I can hear the result. So that was like a hobby to me, the way some kids build model airplanes. I sat in my room and talked to myself, you know. And so then a lot of time went by. I became seduced by rock and roll music. I wanted to be part of that scene, but I had no musical talent. What can I do? And then I hit upon this mad dream of becoming a disc jockey.
Of course.
And that's what I did for the better part of 20 years, or the lousier part of 20 years when I think back. But over time, I began to become disenchanted with radio, and I became more and more interested in the work that I did in the production studio, creating commercials and promos.
Right.
I found that very rewarding. The fact that you could have do-overs. You know, a live DJ, you get one shot at it. It either works or it doesn't. But
Yeah.
in the production room, you can rewind the tape and try again and make it as good as you can. And this led me to begin to wonder about the people who I heard on the national television commercials, the national radio commercials, the cartoon shows on television. Who's doing this work? Who are these people? Who are these people, as Seinfeld would say? And finally, sometime in the early 70s, I discovered this business existed called voiceovers, and that it was a business unto itself.
Right.
That there were folks making a living doing nothing but voiceover work. And I thought, boy, if I'd sat down and tried to invent a career that would be perfect for someone with my dopey little range of skills, it would be voiceovers. This is what I have to do. And it took me another 10 years or so to make it a reality. But by the early 80s, I was in what then a very well-kept secret little business with a relative handful of people actually doing it. That's all changed, of course, sadly. But
Yeah. It really
that's
has.
the short version. The
Yeah,
long
no, and
version. The long version is in this book.
There we go. That was
See what
going
I
to be my
spared
question.
you? I covered this much in 2 minutes. So
No, you
anyway,
did.
we'll get
You
back
did
to
great. Do you? So a few questions. Did you have a favorite radio program growing up?
Yes, there were a couple of them. Mostly comedies as I look back. My family, we all sat around the radio the way one
Yeah.
sits around in front of a television set, and we listened to Jack Benny. And I don't know how many people these days are familiar with Jack Benny, but he was
Of
a
course,
wonderful
Jack Benny.
comedian. Yeah, and he assembled this cast of characters, and the writing was just brilliant. You can still today, if you have Sirius satellite radio, they have a
Yes.
channel that's nothing but the golden age radio, and
Yeah,
they
I
play a
love
lot
that
of Jack
channel.
Benny shows. Yeah, and it holds up in my opinion. Some
It
of the
does.
comedy doesn't, but Jack's show is still funny, and in a very quaint and homey way, but it is funny. And the other show was a show called The Goon Show, which came from England.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I don't
goon
know
in
that
England has a different goon in this country means some big guy who breaks your legs because you didn't pay your gambling debts. In England, it means if we did it in America, it would be called the Idiot Show, something like that.
Right. Right.
And it was just three guys, and one of them, between the three of them, they must have played 30 different characters at least. And the guy who played most of the characters was a then unknown actor named Peter Sellers, who later went on to be a big movie star.
That's the
He
Pink
was
Panther.
absolutely, yeah. He did all the Pink Panther movies, and then he did Being There. That towards the end of his career, that I forget if he won an Academy Award or not, but anyway, it was a much lauded performance. I just ate that stuff up, and these guys doing all these different voices. And the interesting thing about the Goons, and I realized it early on, it wasn't just people doing silly voices. Somehow, particularly with Peter Sellers, you almost believed those people existed. You knew it was all being done by one guy, but somehow he made those characters come to life because he was a wonderful actor. And so you could see them in your mind's eye. They existed, they lived, they breathed, and he put the breath of life into them with his talent. And it's something that not just me, but a lot of people who teach animation work try to get across. It's more than just doing a silly voice. You have to be able to act.
Right.
You have to make that silly voice real. And so those were the two biggest influences on me. And if you read up on all the guys in Monty Python, they all got started listening to the Goon Show. I mean, the guys in the Firesign Theater would talk about the Goon Show. It was a huge influence, even though it was not that well known. But if you did stumble across it, it could be a life changer.
Yeah, I'll find it. It could when I was growing up, which was the early 70s, you could still listen to some of those radio shows. They would still play those. Of course, there was television by then. But I was listening to The Shadow, Green Hornet, Lone Ranger they would do on there, and Abbott and Costello, they play.
I loved the Lone Ranger when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now that I'm grown up, the plot doesn't make any sense.
No.
I still don't understand why he needed to be in disguise. I mean, everybody, I don't know.
Yeah. I know. You don't want to look too closely at it. Did you ever consider, because what I remember about growing up was, I was pre-cable, and I was just a huge baseball fan. So I was, every night, I'd go to sleep listening to a ball game, and
Right.
did you ever consider going into announcing, that type of thing?
You mean as far as being a sports announcer? Or?
Yeah.
No, because I lost all interest in sports somewhere in my late teens. I just stopped caring.
Yeah. That was the rock and roll in you.
Well, yeah, you know what? It was the weirdest thing. I was a huge fan of the Brooklyn Dodgers for a reason. Montreal has always sort of been the number 2 city in Canada. It's in the shadow of Toronto.
Yes.
And somehow Brooklyn was in the shadow of New York. And we also had the Brooklyn farm team in Montreal, the Montreal Royals.
Right.
So everybody in Montreal rooted for the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And
that would have been like Pee Wee Reese, Duke Snyder.
Yeah, that whole era, Carl Erskine.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting the name, but anyway, we moved to California in 1957, and shortly thereafter, the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles. And you would have thought that this would have thrilled me, but I said, this isn't right. They're the Brooklyn Dodgers.
That's right.
They have no business being here.
Well, you haven't acclimated yet to LA. Well, you were still considering yourself an outsider at that point.
It just didn't seem right for the Dodgers not to be in Brooklyn in my 12-year-old mind. And
I think a lot of people would agree with that to this day.
Could be, but my father sat me down and said, get wise. They're not the Brooklyn Dodgers. All those guys, they come from Alabama. They play ball and then they go home with the money.
That's exactly
they don't.
Right.
They're not well, that wasn't really true, but I started thinking, and he said, it's all about money. They're just making money. It's a business. And I thought, he's right. It's a business. Why am I even caring who wins these games? And that was the end of it for me.
That was the end of sports for you.
So that's why I never became a sportscaster. And I realized, I had a buddy who should have been one. He never did. But I mean, we would go in a bar and he would start tossing names out and guys would gather around us. And he would say, remember so-and-so? Oh, I haven't thought about him in 50 years. Oh, you're the best. You know everything. Yeah, get these guys drinks. It was astonishing. And I thought
there you go.
I just didn't have the knowledge because I had stopped caring years ago. I wasn't paying attention.
No. The other thing that I was big into growing up was comic book collecting. And, the first comic book that I ever owned was a Richie Rich comic book. And I read where one of your first voiceovers was in a Richie Rich cartoon.
One of the first animation jobs, yes.
Yeah.
I had done a few animation jobs for Wally Burr on a version of Spider-Man that he did in the late 70s, early 80s. Wally Burr was the director of, went on to be the director of Transformers and G.I. Joe. Yeah, and I did the Green Goblin, I think in that series. But the initial work that I did with Wally, he was very good about it. He was very kind to us, struggling actors, and he would bring me in and I would just play 3 incidental roles: a parking lot attendant, a bus driver, and a cop, this kind of thing. And it helped me to get my feet wet. But then I got into I had a chance to audition for Hanna-Barbera, which was the big deal animation house at the time. And yes, the first job I did at Hanna-Barbera was a guest appearance on Richie Rich. And I cannot describe the feeling of driving up to the guard gate because they had it wasn't like a huge studio, but it was kind of like a little tiny mini movie studio and with a guard gate. And I gave him my name and wonder of wonders. He said, yes, sir, come on in. And the gate went up and I thought, I'm in show business.
That's right. Well, back then, Hanna-Barbera did about half of the cartoons that came out.
Yeah, they really had a lock on it. That changed very quickly after I got into the business. But at the time they were They were the hot studio.
Yeah, and I know, you know, this with comic books, you know, I loved Spider-Man. That was probably my first superhero that I was into. So I knew you did Green Goblin as one of your voices. And if I remember right, you didn't just do those late '70s cartoon. You also did some for the '90s cartoon for Spider-Man.
Yes, yeah, I did Green Goblin in the Spider-Man. I think it was the Wally Burr directed version, late '70s, early '80s. I was not, however, Norman Osborn. Somebody else played that. But then they put Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends into production in around '95.
Right. Yeah.
And I got both roles, Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin, which was kind of fun.
Well, and I know you've done so many voices, but I know you worked on Fantastic Four and did Doctor Doom. And Iron Man, you were the dragon, Fing Fang Foom. So you've done a lot of the voices that you know, we got to you know, by the '90s. I had my own comic book store, so we would kind of gather around and have those cartoons playing in the background. But I thought that was really neat that going back and looking, you had hit a lot of the cartoons, and that's not even touching like Voltron and G.I. Joe, Transformers, and those that you did, you know, so many voices for.
Yeah, it's a wonderful job. I was thinking about it not too long ago. Somebody said, have you ever regretted that you never went on camera? And I said, I guess I'm, you know, in a way, I'm a little curious about that world. But the truth is, I would be limited by my physical appearance. I don't know what sort of a type I am, but, you know, I would probably have played a very narrow range of roles, assuming anybody hired me in the first place. You know, but yeah, that's my one on-camera credit is being a news guy. But anyway, thanks to animation, the fact that you're not limited by your physical appearance, I've been able to do everything. I've been leading men, I've been villains, I've been monsters. I mean, you name it, and parking lot attendants. I mean, you get to play everything.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, that's great. Now, I wish Brett was with us because, you know, he's interested in that type of thing, and that's the part he likes about it, is that you can be. It doesn't matter what you look like; you can be anybody as a voiceover. I hope you froze up, Neal. Just a second, see if you come back. There you are.
I wonder what we should. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed. You froze up on me there.
Yeah, you froze on me too. I was just saying that the part that Brett loves about voiceover work is just the fact that it doesn't matter what you look like. You can be anybody when it's a voiceover.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You know, I haven't been in that world, as I told you, but occasionally on camera, people will drift into our world. Far too many of them lately, but anyway.
Yeah, it's happening a lot, more and more.
Tell us is that the atmosphere in the waiting room of an animation audition is completely different from the atmosphere in the waiting room for an on-camera part.
Really?
I'm led to believe, they kind of glare at each other and try to psych each other out, and it's not a very pleasant place. Whereas you walk into a waiting room, there's a bunch of actors competing with each other for a part, but it's jokes, it's people just being nuts and having fun, and nobody's that obsessed with getting the job. You know, you just, whatever, que sera, sera, whatever will be. And they're amazed that we're that way. Most animation voiceover people do not have big egos. They're very down to earth. And I had one casting person, she said, I think it's because you're not judged by your looks.
Well, that may be.
Which may be. I mean, you know, I just, it seems like a much friendlier business than on camera, but I have not, full disclosure, obviously done on camera. So maybe maybe they're not as bad as I paint them. But
do you run into a lot of the same people for the voiceover jobs?
Well, unfortunately, these days I hardly run into anybody because I do a lot of work from home studio. And then when they do bring you in to do a game or an animation project, a
Yeah.
lot of the time you work alone now. In the old days, they used to insist that the full cast be there for every
Right.
episode. But I think it's because they've used so many celebrities and they're only available when they're available. And they've kind
Right.
of gotten into the swing of just doing it one actor at a time, which I think is, I hate that.
Not as
Part
much
of
fun.
acting is reacting. It's like
Right.
trying to a volley in tennis, two good actors going at it. It's like, as I said, a really exciting volley in tennis. But if the other person isn't on the other side of the net and you have to imagine them hitting a ball to you, I don't think you're as good.
Yeah, that would be difficult. I think I'd have a really hard time with that. A lot easier to get into the role, I think, if you're
Yeah,
in a room full
yeah.
of people.
I mean, sometimes I think I know how I'm going to read a line, and then I hear how the other actor reads his or her line, and I go, "Oh, I got to change this up real quick to fit that." And sometimes that makes it better.
Yeah. what
You know?
what do you think about the video game voiceovers? Because you've done a lot of the really popular games. I mean, was that new to you, or was that something you just kind of no big deal?
Um, well, for an odd reason, maybe no big deal. I mean, it's very different. Unlike animation, there's no plot. You
Right.
work alone. A lot of the time you don't know what's going on. You ask the director, why am I saying this? What's happening here? And they go, I don't really know. Because these games are so complicated, even the guy directing it isn't sure. And so you just sort of have to look at the line and, well, he seems to be angry here. I better do this angry, And because of all the time spent working for Burr, who I mentioned again, he used to
Yeah.
interrupt a lot. You couldn't really get a flow of a scene. He kept stopping. No, we need to go back. I want to do this again. You would do the same line sometimes 20
Oh
times
man.
to get it the way Wally wanted it. So I got pretty good at just doing lines in the clear without any inspiration, just in the clear. Angry,
Yeah.
you want angry. I'm going to get you. And I think some actors have trouble with that, but after several years with Wally, I was okay. So
Yeah.
so
He
that
helped you
kind of,
out.
as mad as I used to get at him in a perverse way, it helped me work on games. So I should be grateful.
Yeah, I saw you've worked on some of the Doom games, Call of Duty,
Mm-hmm.
Baldur's Gate, Mass Effects, and then you've done some of the Star Wars games where you got to voice Han Solo.
Yeah, nobody ever said try to sound like Harrison Ford. People have asked me about that. Some people say that I have a similar voice to Harrison Ford. I don't really hear that, but so I don't know why I got those parts. Nobody ever, other than the fact of my obvious blazing talent. I don't know how I got those parts, but
Well, I
nobody.
mean, do you try to imitate him when you do the
No,
voice?
no.
Okay.
The only two parts where imitation played a big part in it were Shipwreck and
Yeah.
Rambo.
Yeah, I love the fact that you did Rambo with that. Can you do a good John Rambo?
Well, that's the funny part of the story. So I show up and they say, now, before you do anything, we want to tell you we do not want a Sylvester Stallone sound alike.
Well, I don't know why not.
I said, okay, got it. I know just what to do. Roll tape. And thinking I was going to make them laugh, I said, all right, so you go around this side and before you come with me and I'm going to do this and we're going to attack and whatever the line was.
Right.
And they go, that's perfect. And I said, I thought you didn't want a Sylvester Stallone sound alike. And they said, that doesn't sound like Sylvester Stallone. And I said, yes, of course, you're right. It doesn't, because I'm not an idiot.
Yeah, why would you argue?
So the whole thing was based on what was obviously a lousy impression, but it ended up getting me the job. And kind of the same thing happened with Shipwreck
Yeah.
in G.I. Joe. I came in to read for that, did 2 or 3 passes, and I could tell nobody was thrilled, and I was out of ideas. So I was just getting ready to say, well, it's been nice. Thanks, guys. And there's a guy sitting over in the corner, and he says to me, you ever seen the movie The Last Detail?
Yep.
Now, for those not familiar with it, Last Detail was a movie Jack Nicholson did, in which he played a rather scruffy sailor, Billy Badass Badusky.
Yeah.
And he was actually nominated for Best Actor that year. He didn't win. But what happened was very quickly thereafter, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Chinatown came out. And so everybody sort of forgot about The Last Detail.
Right.
But that's what they had in mind for Shipwreck. And thank goodness I had seen the movie. And what immediately popped in my mind, and I think you can still find it on YouTube, was the bar scene in The Last Detail where the guy doesn't want to serve them. And
right.
Says,
yeah.
You guys want me to call the shore patrol? And Nicholson's character, Badass Badusky, grabs this 45 semi-auto out of his holster and slams it on the bar and says, you want the shore patrol? We are the mother bleeping shore patrol. Now 3 beers. And I said, I know what they want. And I had done this voice over the years. It's sort of all-purpose stoner voice, guys had a little too much, weed.
Yeah.
And people had occasionally remarked that it was sort of Nicholson-esque. So I thought, what if I took the joint away from him and gave him about 6 pots of coffee? I wonder what would happen then. I guess he'd sort of sound like this. And I started to do this audition this way. And when I got through, the guy in the corner looked at me and he said, you got it. Which is that's usually the kiss of death when they tell you you've got it. You don't got it. But in this case, I did. And again, it's not a great Nicholson impression. It was Nicholson-esque. Of course, he sounds nothing like that now. He's, he's somewhere down in here.
That's right. Right. Yeah.
I can't do him anymore.
Now. Well, I know that I think the first time that I saw you was at one of the conventions. I was curious. Were you surprised by the level of fandom around, especially G.I. Joe?
Yes, I was absolutely floored. People started talking to me about these conventions, and I just had this mental picture of me sitting at a card table in a hall being ignored. And I said, no, not for me. And finally, they held a BotCon in Pasadena.
Yeah.
Transformers-oriented show.
Oh, yeah.
And they invited me, and I thought, well, that's Pasadena. If it's just horrible, I'll give them their money back, and I'll just go home. I can drive home. It's not like I'm in Lexington, Kentucky, and hailing an Uber. Could you take me to L.A., please? So I went, and I couldn't believe it. Yeah. I remember one particular moment where they said, you're going to sign some autographs. Oh, okay. It was Greg Berger and me, and they take us down a hall, and we walk out of a curtain, and there's a couple of tables sitting there, and there is this line of people that stretched into infinity. And I said, who are they in line for? And they said, they're in line for you. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. So not every show has been that great, but that's when I started doing them, and I'm no longer surprised. But back then, it really is amazing that after 30 plus years, people still care enough to show up and want to meet you and get an autograph. It's just an amazing gift.
Well, I'm sure that a lot of those voices were like mine. They're part of our childhood, or at least our teenage years. So then it's very nostalgic when you get a chance to kind of relive that and meet the person that did some of the voices. So,
well, I have people come up all the time and say, well, thank you for making my childhood. And I say, thank you for making my middle age.
What was the voices, or what was the main voice that you did for Transformers?
For a long time, I cruised along doing Hook, Slag, and Bone Crusher. And then just before the movie was made, the Transformers, the movie in 1984, 5, I think, or 6.
Something right around there, yeah.
I started doing the character Springer.
Springer, okay.
And Springer's probably the most popular
Yeah.
Transformers character,
Yeah,
even though he
I
came
could
along
remember
later.
the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
You want to hear the famous line? Everybody else does.
Of course.
I've got better things to do tonight than die.
So I didn't even have to ask.
No, again,
I'll try not to.
Talk about wonderful gifts. We went to the premiere of the movie in Westwood.
Yeah.
And Springer came on and said that line, and the theater went nuts. They cheered for the next 2 minutes. All the dialogue from that point on was obliterated by cheering and yelling. And I thought, I'm on to something here.
That has to be a good feeling.
Yeah, to have a tagline, that you're known for it. That's worth its weight in gold. So yeah, no.
Well,
that's the best line that's ever been written.
Well, yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Ron Friedman.
Well, and I love the fact, I think when I saw you, if I remember right, you were in like a sailor getup. You were kind of dressed as Shipwreck.
Yes, I do a little cosplaying.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, somebody suggested it. A guy dropped by the booth and said, unlike everybody else here, you do sort of look like your character. And when I dye the beard, I look like Shipwreck's grandfather, but there is a slight resemblance. In fact, people have said, did they design the character after you? I said, no,
I could see it.
Well, I looked nothing like this back then. I was a little bit heavier and I didn't have a beard, and no.
Well, you grew into Shipwreck.
Yeah, I guess I did. And there are some remarkable parallels. He's from Chula Vista, which is a San Diego suburb. I went to high school lived in Ocean Beach, which is a San Diego suburb.
Yeah. We
were both in the Navy. He outranks me. He's what is he? Is he not a master chief? He's one rung below. Well, anyway, he's an E6, I think, or an E7. I was an E4. But yeah,
Well, I hung out with a lot of guys that were into G.I. Joe, and there's a few of them that are the favorites, but Shipwreck is always one of them. Everybody loves Shipwreck.
Well, to me, excuse me, he was the most interesting character in the show. Because if you think about it, all the good guys were really, really good, and all the bad guys were really, really bad. But Shipwreck was somewhere in the middle.
That's right.
He wanted to do the right thing, but he didn't like taking orders.
Yeah.
And he wanted to do stuff his way, which got him into trouble, which made him, to my mind, a much more interesting character.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, agree. Now, do you have a favorite? You've done all these cartoons, and you did so much work for Hanna-Barbera, and I even saw you did the wrestling cartoon that was out briefly. You did Mean Gene.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite out of the roles on the cartoons?
Well, selfishly, I love Shipwreck. I always did, and then the fact that his popularity has lasted all this time. He's got to be right up there. Springer is another one.
Yeah.
That's a favorite of mine. Then there's some odd parts that are not that well remembered. I had a lot of fun playing the newsman Whitley White in Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yeah.
I sort of
I haven't heard that one in a while.
Yeah, I patterned that after this rather bombastic newscaster we had in Los Angeles in those days. And it was so well written and so funny. When I would do some of his speeches, I would be this close to just cracking up and losing it. Somehow I never did, but it was a lot of fun to play him.
Yeah.
And somebody else popped into my mind, now I've spaced it. Maybe it'll come back to me.
I didn't realize this, but you actually did some work with the Emmys and the Academy Awards at one time.
Yes, yeah, I was very fortunate. I really run the gamut. In fact, I didn't think it was possible, but I just recently have done announcing on a game show. It's a summer replacement show called Prep Your Luck.
Yeah.
Ran last summer. It's coming back this summer for 13 more episodes. I had never done a game show. I
Yeah.
thought I'd done everything in this business, but I had never done a game show. Now I think I have done everything in this business. So I've been lucky enough to do narrations, 25 or more novas for public television. I'm narrating a thing for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the history of JPL. It's going to be coming out fairly soon. And yes, I was lucky enough to be the announcer on the Academy Awards in 2003, co-announcer with oh, why can I not think of her name? It'll come back to me. And then I was the announcer on the Emmys the following year. And then I did 7 AFI Life Achievement Award telecasts.
Wow.
Randy Thomas was the co-announcer on
Yeah.
the Academy Awards. How could I forget?
Yeah, that's well, and you were nominated for an Emmy on one of those novas that you did.
Well, not me personally, but the show was
The
nominated.
show.
Yeah.
I thought that was really great. Those the PBS work especially, those were must watch during my school days. Those were the ones they rolled the TV out for and would turn the shows on and stuff. And
well, it meant a lot to me because I remember Nova started in the 70s, and I'm a humble disc jockey down in San Diego. And I would watch that on television and could never have even allowed myself to dream that I would get to narrate one of those, let alone 20 plus.
Yeah.
So that was amazing. A dream come true. It really was.
Yeah, that's really really incredible. Now you showed you brought your book up there a little bit ago. Did you
bring it up again?
Yeah, bring it up there. Yeah, hold it up there. Did you get to do the audio version?
Yes, it was a highly competitive audition. and since Stacy Keach was not available,
I love that reference.
I went ahead and did it, and
no Mike Hammer for you.
No. I love him on what is it? What's that show? American Greed.
Yes.
Scams and Scoundrels. I don't know if you ever watched that.
I have.
But he takes such delight in telling you about these people who stole all your money.
Yeah. He would do a really good voiceover for your book. That I got to think who I'd want for me, but yeah, I could totally see him reading your book.
Well, he sure couldn't. So
come on, Stacy.
Yeah. What do you got? What else you got to do? Probably a lot.
Probably a lot. Yeah, he pops up. It seems like here and there on different shows, and he's always had such a great voice and presence. That's really neat.
The other guy I like a lot is Keith Morrison. He's on what is it? I always get those shows mixed up. Is it 2020 or I don't know, but the crime shows. Yeah,
it's shoot, it may be 2020, but that's I was thinking it was like Nightline or one of those. It's one of those.
But he savors the crime.
Yes.
She said she was innocent, but the police knew better.
That's right. Yeah, those were so good. He would have been a good voice for radio back in the 50s.
Sure. Yeah. No, he's got a lovely set of pipes.
Well, so any voices out there that you would like to do that you've never got the chance to do?
No, as I said, I've run the gamut. I don't think there's any phase of voiceovers I haven't participated in to one degree or another. I haven't announced bus arrivals, but other than that, I think I've done every kind of voiceover that's possible.
It's amazing. Amazing how much you. Well, do you have a imitation that you've never got to do?
Well, again, I should explain the process that we use. I think all of us. Michael Bell has this wonderful analogy. Michael Bell, of course, very prominent in G.I. Joe and Transformers and Voltron. Somehow I can't get away from the man.
We've got a chance to meet him. Really nice gentleman.
Yeah, and incredibly talented and very, very perceptive about acting.
Yeah.
And he describes what animation actors do as vocal Mr. Potato Head. Are you familiar with that game?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. You know, it comes with different noses and ears and mouths and mustaches and glasses,
Classic.
and you change the face. Well, we're doing that with our voices.
Yeah.
An old man.
Well, okay, is he an old man down here? Is he an old man up here? Does he have an underbite?
You can go on for hours like this. And this is what we're doing. It's some people I seem to think that, you know, I have 24 voices and I show up in an audition and say, I think for this one, I'll use number 11. That's not how it works. You show up, you see a drawing, you read a or two paragraph description, and you start trying to think, what the hell should this guy sound like? And you begin to develop a voice in your head, and then when you get in the room, you try to reproduce that with your throat.
Yeah.
And if all goes well, you've got a job. So, if you know, is there anything I want to do? Yeah, I'm sure there is, but I don't know what it is until I see face and the copy, and I get the idea, and I start to do it, and then I'll go, oh, this is something I've never done before, and this is fun.
Yeah, that's actually that's a great explanation. Have you done the books on audio before? Have you done any of those?
No, my book is my debut. Frankly, that's a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
I mean, when I actually had ended up reading this thing twice because there were some technical problems with my first run through. And I mean, when I got finished, I said, I don't know if I would want to do this on a regular basis. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a gentleman on that's what he does. And he said he's got a little closet in his house, and he goes and sits in that closet for hours every day, just, you know, reading.
Does he do anything while he's in there?
Just reads, I guess.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry.
But it just sounded to me, that just did not sound like a terrific job to me. But he loved it, but that wasn't for me.
Well, it's grueling, you know. You do a commercial, you're maybe in there for an hour. You do an animated show, you might be in there 3 or 4 hours. But to read a book from cover to cover, any kind of lengthy book, you're talking a lot of hours.
Yeah, a lot of work. Yeah, and that's one I didn't ask you was I know you've done commercials for just about everybody. You know, what was your first commercial?
Ironically, the out and out first commercial I ever did was my first radio job in Salt Lake City, Utah. It was for some sort of fast food. It might have been A&W root beer.
Yeah, I remember those.
Just the local A&W. It wasn't like a national commercial or anything. Anyway, it only aired once. The program director heard it and deemed it so awful that he took it off the air and had somebody else do it. And I was told, you don't get to voice any commercials. All you do is drone work in the production studio, making copies of things.
Oh, that's funny.
And I was heartbroken, and I started coming in at night and practicing.
Yeah.
And after a few months, I thought I'd gotten a little better. And then an emergency situation arose. They needed something right away. I was the only one in the building. I did it. Program director said, well, I heard that one. It's not too awful. I guess you can start voicing stuff now. And it went on from there. But I thought, how deliciously ironic, the guy who goes on to narrate 20 plus Novas and Academy Awards, et cetera, the first thing he ever does is kick back and deemed so horrible he's not allowed to do any more of it, you know.
Well, and I always like looking back at those type of situations, because it would have been very easy for you just to say, okay, that's not my thing, and never get into it.
Yeah. I just felt like I got to conquer this beast somehow. And
yeah, that's great.
You know, practice. It's the only way I know to get better. Practice.
Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely the truth. Something that we have tried to do with the podcast. We're up over 100 now. So we've done it, you know, for about a little over a year, I think. So we're a work in progress.
Well, you can only get better. You know?
That's right.
No, I'm serious. There's really, people say, well, what's your advice to anyone getting into voiceovers? And I suppose it would be my advice to anybody getting into anything, but
Yeah.
I call it the 3 Ps, and then I usually forget one of them, but it's basically practice and persistence and patience.
Yeah, I like that.
And, practice is a big part of that element. And these days, tape recorders are not the size of suitcases. You can go out and get a little recorder for practically no money.
That's right.
You can always practice at home. I mean, if you can, record all the commercials that you hear on an evening of primetime television.
That's a great.
Type them up and then do them yourself and see, well, wow, I don't sound as good as those guys. Why don't I sound as good as they do? Well, that's something you need to work on, isn't it? So that when you do get a chance, you're ready.
Yeah, I love that, and it's that's really good advice. I'll make sure that Brett watches that, because he's the one that's wanting to kind of break into acting, or he likes to write, and he works on film and that type of thing. So I'll make sure he watches that, because that's really good advice. Well, Neal, thank you so much for giving me a little bit of time today. Before I let you go, though, where are you going to be next? Where can people find you if they want to look you up? Kind of give us that.
Okay, well, of course, these are rather uncertain times. Things are being canceled left and right. I am scheduled to do the New Jersey Comic Fest at the end of June.
Yeah.
Last weekend of June. Let's hope by then this horrible situation is far behind us and we can all get together at that and have fun. But, well, we'll just see what happens. But that's my next scheduled appearance.
Yeah, we were supposed to cover Lexington, this comic expo, and it got postponed. It was this weekend, and it got postponed till May. So we'll see.
At any rate, that's where I'm going to be in person. If all goes well, and I have my own personal website that's really more for the industry. It's got my demos on there.
Yeah, I went and listened to a few of those. Yeah, it's kind of fun to listen to.
Yeah, that's neilross.com, neilross.com. I paid a consultant a fortune to come up with that for me. And then there's this book that I keep mentioning. Yeah. And I made a little visual aid. I don't know if you can read that.
Yeah, you can read it.
www.neilbook.com.
Yeah, perfect.
And that will take you to the site that tells you all about this and how I'm trying to get rid of the glare.
Yeah, that's perfect. You can see it.
And if how you can order yourself a copy. Yep. It's available in print, Kindle, audio. I think that's it.
Well, and I'll be getting that for Brett, so he can definitely check it out. Now, does it give some pointers, and it goes through your life, kind of career?
It's basically an autobiography. I don't deal a great deal with my personal life because I wanted people to. Well, I could actually write a book about my personal life and sell it as a sleep aid, but this is more about my career. Yeah. The title of the book is Vocal Recall: A Life in Radio and Voiceovers. And it starts with me 5 or 6 years old in my room doing silly voices, and takes you through the whole sweep of what happened to me in the radio business, and then how I discovered voiceovers, how I broke into voiceovers, and what I did once I got into voiceovers. And I deal with certain specific shows as chapters on Transformers, chapters on G.I. Joe, chapters on Voltron, the whole thing. So, and this is a little bit about technique and that sort of thing. But it really isn't an instruction manual by any stretch of the imagination.
No, but you've kind of had such an interesting career. I think people would really enjoy that. And there's so many voices that you've done that we didn't touch on. Tried to hit some of the. Before I let you go, I did almost forget one. I've been trying to get Brett to read the Dragonlance books forever. And I know that you did the voice for Fizban on the Dragonlance, the movie, Dragons of Autumn, Twilight, or Spring Dawning. Yeah. So I
know I did that. I remember almost nothing about it. In fact, pretty much nothing about it. It's, you know, it was
he was kind of the he's kind of the Gandalf of Dragonlance, you know, if you had to compare him to something, kind of he played kind of an absent-minded, you know, magic user type. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I got a big kick that you did the voice for him.
Yeah, I wish I had some cool story about it, but as I said, I remember almost nothing about doing that at all.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the voice sounded like.
Yeah, you probably showed up, did it, and that was it.
Well, that's what happens in a lot of these, particularly games. People want stories about games, and the truth of the matter is it's 4 hours out of my life, and I'm back on the freeway, and 2 days later, I forgot I even did it. Whereas you buy the game, and you hear the voice over and over and over again. You hear it in your sleep, and you want to know my motivation.
That's right.
You know, and I don't even remember doing it. You know, it's kind of embarrassing sometimes. People say, you were so and so and such, and I say, I was. I've forgotten. You know.
Well, you've done so many. I could totally see how you could do that. That's a credit, I think, that to the how busy your career has been over the years.
Well, thank you. But a lot of it's just 4 hours out of my life.
Right.
You know,
it's just a short.
Whereas a Shipwreck, I showed up for I don't know how many sessions. I played that character over and over again over the space of a year and a half, 2 years. So obviously I remember a lot about it, and I can tell stories. But these games, as I said, a lot of times it's you show up, do 4 hours, you're gone, and there's nothing really to hang on to. Especially there's not even a plot, as I mentioned. So.
No, I completely understand. Yeah, those video games. And of course, I played the Ataris and stuff growing up. Video games today, that's beyond me. That's
the first game I ever did. I didn't even know what I was doing. It was called Stunt Island. And and it came out. I swear, half your audience won't even know what I'm talking about. It came out on floppy disks.
Oh yeah. So it was for was it for like a Commodore or
probably
Big 20,
I didn't
like that computer?
I didn't own a computer when I did this.
Yeah.
And what are we doing here? I don't. It's for this
probably
new
back
thing.
Back in the 80s, maybe.
I
90s?
think it was 1990.
Yeah.
I think it was 1990, and I only did 9 lines because the director said that's all we have room for.
Yeah. It's high tech back in those days.
And you contrast that with what they're doing today. I mean,
it's
just laughable. But
you
know,
amazing. Well, I also wanted to mention that anyone that's curious about everything that you've done, in addition to the places you mentioned, they can also find you on IMDb. It lists everything. You've also got a Wikipedia page. It lists everything you've done.
Yes. Which my daughter and I went through, and we took out all the incorrect stuff. So.
That's right. Yeah, you got to watch that because anybody can do it.
I don't know who writes on there, but I popped it up once and said, they said my middle name was Hieronymus, which is cool. I don't have a middle name.
That's a good middle name.
I probably should adopt it, but it's not true, so I took it out.
That's funny. Well, Neal, thank you so much for the time. This was great. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that we'll see you at one of these shows when they start having them again. Might be New Jersey. We may we need to take a trip out there, so we may see you there.
Well, let's hope it happens. As I said, let's hope by the end of June this is all a distant, unhappy memory.
Yeah, for sure.
The virus, I mean, not this show.
Yeah.
And and we're all back to normal.
That's right. Yeah, let's cross our fingers and hope that everybody stays safe and we all get past it pretty quick.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
thank you, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day. I guess it's about the middle of the afternoon for you. We're
Yeah.
heading into the evening for us, but
Right.
appreciate your time, and hopefully, we can speak again to you in the future.
Sounds good, Michael. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir. Yes, sir. I'll talk to you again soon, and I'll let you go. I'm going to hit the end of record.